I've always had a gift of seeing spirits. I have the gift of second sight ever since I was little. So this young lady came over and she sat down with us and she was sitting she's covered in these marks. She's got claw marks all over her. The claw marks look like cat scratches. They're thin, just like that. And the thing is that she had kind of started to tell me the story and the other nurse the story about how she had been molested by their minister from the age 10 to like age 14. And then when she started hearing 25 different voices, she referenced that there was one. And the thing about the voices, a lot of them can be disembodied souls that have not crossed over, because we do have a choice to cross over or not at the time of death. But they're always controlled by something darker. And she had made mention that one of them had a very long fingernail and was scratching her on the inside of her female parts, and that the facility was saying that they were self-inflicted. Prior to that, I had purchased a home in East Flat Rock, North Carolina, as a single mother with 2 kids, and it was haunted so bad, I never moved it. Unbeknownst to me, it was haunted. I didn't know it when I purchased it. I found out. I've got teams of witnesses and groups of people that I had come through there that either saw and or were touched or affected adversely by the spirits in that house. But at one point, I was in that house, and I'm mentioning this to have people understand how I identified the claw marks on this woman. Is in the kitchen. I was standing with my best friend. She's holding something in each hand. We see this ectoplasm wall coming at us, and all of a sudden she starts screaming, and she ends up with a claw mark on her back, between her shoulder blades, underneath her bra strap on her back, and also one on her stomach. That was caused by a demon that was coming into the room with that ectoplasmic portal. So I recognized the claw marks being the same as the ones that I saw happen on my best friend while I stood next to her in that kitchen. So I'm thinking, oh my God, this poor woman, she's covered in claw marks. I could see it on her legs, and she had them in places that there is just no way that she could have done them at that angle to herself. There's just, she would have had to have been a contortionist. I mean, there's just no way to have reached at that angle to create those claw marks on her. And she was then called away. It was time for her appointment with her social worker or her psychiatrist or somebody. And she got up and she started to walk away. And as she got probably like 15 or 20 feet away, I'm looking, not even 20, probably more like 15 feet away, I'm noticing that she has these clustered grape-looking type things over each shoulder, like she had a clear single-size pillowcase, but yet they weren't encased, but they were all kind of clustered together like that, like Santa Claus bags almost. And I'm like, oh my God, she really is hearing 25 voices. She's got attachments on her back. And after she had returned...
No, you're seeing this in the spiritual
yes.
sense, in the spiritual realm, correct?
Yes,
Lynn, do you have the drawing?
You know what? I do. But I think, I'm sorry, it got moved. Let me look for it in just a few minutes for you.
Okay.
I meant to sit it here, and my daughter's birthday, it might have accidentally gotten moved. But what it looks like is they're about the size of potatoes. Some of the faces are inverted, so the mouth is on the top and the eyes are on the bottom. Some are sideways, some are upright like normal. And I say potatoes misshapen because, of course, they have no bones. So they were all kind of clustered together like grapes on her back, and they were attached to her shoulders with this horn, like hollow-looking horn-type thing that came in at the top of her shoulders and then clipped underneath her armpit. It didn't go all the way around. It was just at the top. So there was a little bit of a gap. And it was kind of a brownish tan color, kind of twisted like a horn. And that seemed to be what was clustering them together. So that's why I say they looked like they were clustered like grapes. When she returned from her appointment with her doctor, she went to her room, and I went to her down the hallway. She was just 3 doors down from my patient anyway. So I went and I knocked on her door frame, and she invited me in. And I said to her, I said, look, I said, if you repeat what I'm about ready to tell you, they're going to think that you're crazier, and they're going to keep you in here longer. So what I'm telling you, you need to not mention to anybody, but I believe that you are in fact hearing 25 different voices because you've got attachments on your back. And she's in that moment, I had been having some personal things going on in my life, and there is a preparation that goes with it before you just go taking attachments off of people, because you don't want them to attach to you and you bring them home. So you have to do certain things to protect yourself, and of course be in a space where, you're not under a lot of stress or, even tired for that matter. You need to be fully alert and oriented and on par, like at 100%. So as she turned from me, something just overcame me because I wasn't going to do it. And I just reached my hand up underneath those horn things, and I picked them up off of her, and they came off very, very easily. And she immediately turned at me because they were starting to fall to the ground. I'm trying to stomp them into the ground. Some of them have rolled away. And she turns to me and she says, "It felt like you were pulling grass off my back." So she didn't know that I was taking them off of her back. I didn't tell her. I didn't ask her permission. I just, went ahead and did that. And she did feel it. She said that, like I said, it felt like hair coming off of her back. And I told her in that moment, I said, "Look, this is a temporary fix." I said, "Some of them have rolled away over by your bed. They can reattach to you, but I've gotten the bulk of them off. When you get out of here, you need to go and find someone that removes these things from you." I said, "You find a Catholic priest, find someone that, find somebody in the Latin religions that do this kind of thing and have them, remove this from you." So I did run into her about a year later in the Walmart. I was in the candle section squatting down. I see these two women at the end of the aisle, and they're talking to each other, looking at me. And I'm like, I'm checking for toilet paper on my shoe if my zipper's down. I thought, maybe something. And I stood up and I hear one of them saying to the other, "No, I know that's her." And I thought, oh, it's a fan. Maybe it's somebody that read my book, And so she comes over and she says, "Do you remember me?" And she looked so different. I mean, when she was in the facility, her skin was almost an ashen color because she was being so drained by these things that were sucking her life from her, and they were feeding on her energy. And she looked very pink. She had a cute little blonde bob, looked completely different, had lost weight. And I'm looking at her and I'm like, "You're familiar, but I'm sorry, I can't place you." And she said, "You're the nurse. You're the nurse that helped me." And I said to her, and I all of a sudden in that moment, I'm like, "Oh my God," and she's telling me that she went and she got help from someone. She said that she was now on a low dose of some anti-anxiety medication, and she was in her second year of becoming a dental hygienist. So her life completely turned around. Unfortunately, she didn't tell anybody what I had told her, but I have to say this. I found out that the following year, for some reason, the facility wasn't allowing that particular school back in there again. I don't know why, but anyway, but I started walking around the facility because we were there for a whole week, and we were in different areas of the facility, and I started looking at people, noticing the ones that had attachments that looked like hers, and ones that had these backpack looking things on them. And I asked my other nursing friends, I said, "Hey, by chance does your client have schizophrenia?" And they're like, yeah, "How did you know?" And I'm like, "Oh, I just wondered." And out of all of them, I only got one time wrong, and it was because it was a person that had a combination of addiction and the diagnosis of schizophrenia. I mean, sometimes I'm walking through the grocery store and I'm walking past and I kind of see this tentacle thing peeking out from one of a person, maybe with an addiction, that has like a spider looking archon on it, and I'm like, whew, don't want that to attach to me, because sometimes they will reach out and attach onto you just innocently in a grocery store. I mean, it's so important for people to keep up with their energetic fields and keep it clear and clean and keep it solid, because if you get a crack in the windshield, you're a candidate to be bringing something home with you that belongs to somebody else. Well, for one thing, they're invited. They're invited by the person dabbling in different types of addiction. And it's not just drugs and alcohol. It's sex addiction. It's porno. It's gambling. It's anything that's going to create a rippling effect of negativity in a person's life, as well as their extended families and even into the neighborhood, depending on how outrageous they get when they're under the influence. and I was also listening to what Jerry was saying. Those kind of sound like skinwalkers too, jumping in the back of the truck like that. But they can leave bruises, they can leave bite marks, they can pull hair, they can leave claw marks. Those platforms, when they get matured, they become platforms for demonic or darker entities to enter in on. The appearance of them, as I had mentioned, that on the girl they looked like potato-sized grapes that were clustered together, almost like on a grapevine. And you could actually see the eyes and the mouth. Usually they're like in a O formation. They don't smile or anything, and they can be inverted. On the person with the addiction, they fit like a neat little backpack, literally shoulders to waist. They hook in at the hips and at the tops of the shoulders. The thing that's very distinct about them is they have a much smaller head in proportion to the body. They look like reptiles, kind of like a lizard-looking thing with a tail that curls around. Sometimes those have a human buttocks and no tail. There are spiders and crabs. I don't know if the type of addiction, if it's the luck of the draw, which one you get, or if it's based on drugs versus alcohol versus porno. If you get a certain type, but they do look like those. But on each of them, the bodies, they have this smaller head. They have a fin that starts at the top of their head that goes back and fits into the nape of their neck. It's kind of like a shark fin, but it's not rigid, it's floppy. So it hangs kind of like a kerchief in the back when they're upright. The thing about them is that they're not something that can just be removed. And I've gotten a lot of emails recently of, oh, well, I've had this drug problem, for X amount of years, and I need you to help me remove my archon. I call them archons. It's not as easy to remove those as it is to remove the ones from a person with schizophrenia, but there's a whole process. There's life change. There's changing maybe people that are around you. Sometimes things in your environment need to be cleaned up. You don't just take them off and then everything is okay, because some of your life choices have brought this onto you to begin with. The difference between the schizophrenic attachments that can reattach and the archons is when a person has dealt with their addiction, the archon will detach, but it never leaves. It always is constantly staying in their realm, trying to coerce them to slip up again. Because hey, they had a good thing going. If the guy's an alcoholic, they're just feeding off of that energy and all the negativity that the job loss, sometimes the cheating, this, that, and the other thing that sometimes comes in, or the abuse issues with family members, type thing. So, they want to keep a good thing going. These archonic, they draw on that negativity. It's their candy. They love it. It's their chocolate. So, when they detach, they want to reattach. And that's why it's such a fight for people when they come off of their addiction. It's so important that they have a good support system, and that they stick with their 12-step program if that's what they're doing, or with their religion, or not necessarily religion in the sense of traditional religion, their spirituality, whatever it is that they do, that it takes for them to be able to stay away from the substance and not allow that archon to reattach. My brother was a crack cocaine addict, and he had an archon that would travel with him. And it's not so much the act of the sex and the drugs, it's the negative connotation that comes with it. Sex is a wonderful thing. Lovemaking is even better. But when it's just the act of sex, it's not a loving act. Right. It's more towards the dark than just the light. And I'm not saying that from a biblical thing, because you're exchanging energy with people. When you are doing it as a loving act, that energy is cyclical. It rotates through the body, yours and the person's that you're with. When it's just an act, just for that fling in that moment, just to get satisfaction, which really leaves you empty on the flip side. It doesn't have that connectedness with the energy fields. My brother had overcome, he was also an alcoholic. He overcame his addiction, and he had one of the reptilian archons, which I drew a picture of in my book. And his was the kind with the human buttocks, and it would precede him, even though he had been 20 years clean, it would precede him. I would be in my house and my kids would be. My kids are empaths too. And I'm like, I would see literally the Archon on the ceiling of my house. It would go from corner to corner and across, jumping. And that's why I knew about the fin thing on the head being floppy, because when it would turn its head around, it would flop over its face. And I'd say to my kids, I'd say, oh, Uncle Ray's coming to visit. And my kids would see it too, not just me, or they would mention it. I saw Uncle Ray's friend and I think, he's going to be coming. And lo and behold, within a day or so, I would get a call that he was on his way up to visit my mom and I, and my kids and, from Florida, and he would come on his way. And then as soon as he would get there, it would disappear. But when I also went to visit him in his home in Florida, that thing was in his house. The same thing, and it would frighten my kids, so we even had sometimes when we'd go to stay, we didn't intend on staying on the house, we'd end up staying in a hotel because my kids didn't like having that thing watching them. And again, they're always there enticing you, whispering at you, wanting you to mess up. And that's why addiction is so hard to treat. And again, it's something invited. It's not something that you're born with. It's not something that you're destined to be because of your dysfunctional family. It's something that you invite into your life and it never goes away. And that's unfortunate. It gets off of you, but it's always there trying to trip you up. During the time that I was dealing with the haunted house that I never moved into, it was that bad. I spent 2 nights there. That was enough. Claw marks and bite marks on my kids and, claw marks on my friend. So I was trying to get someone to come and help me clear the house. So, of course, I went through all of the yellow pages, calling every church that I could, because that's all that I knew to do at the time. And, of course, I was turned away by most of them. And I finally got a lady that was American Indian, and she and her friend came to my house, and they pulled into the driveway, and she's looking at the house, and she said, if your house had been built over 3 feet, it would not have been haunted, because I've learned that it's not about the house or the age of the house, it's about the age of the ground that it's built on. So a brand new place can be haunted if it's built in the wrong place. But my daughter had been complaining for weeks about pain in her shoulder and her back area. And I thought, her backpack must have weighed 30 to 50 pounds with all the books in it. So I thought maybe that was doing it. And my daughter at the time was 14 years old. So she wasn't drug seeking. I mean, she didn't even have access to anything like that. All we had in the house was Tylenol and Advil, and cold medicine. So she didn't even, I raised her as a single mother. She didn't even know that that was really an option other than to say no to. So she was complaining of the pain. I got her a rolling backpack thinking that it was because of the backpack creating pain problems for her. She still complained of the pain. And finally, there was one weekend that I actually took off work because I thought I was going to have to take her to the emergency room. I thought, man, the Tylenol's not working, the Advil's not working. She's complaining of all of this pain. Maybe she's got something ruptured in there or something that she broke her. And I don't want to be negligent as a mother and not go to see about having her treated. And it just so happened that she ended up falling asleep. It was on a Sunday. She fell asleep, and the next day was Monday when I was supposed to meet these people that were coming to, I call it the haunted mansion to help clear the house as one final attempt so that I could maybe hopefully move into the house before putting it up for sale. So my daughter was with me that day. I'd kept her out of school and she was with me, and she was sitting, there was this area with some brick that you could sit on like a planter, and she was sitting on that in front of the house. This house was a half-acre lot. The house was recessed back in, so it had kind of a long driveway where she couldn't even hear us talking. And when the lady got out of the car, she pointed at my daughter and she said, "Is she complaining of pain in her shoulder?" And I was kind of taken back by it because I thought, well, yeah, we hadn't even discussed that. I mean, I didn't even imagine that could be something other than a physiological thing. And I said, well, yeah. As a matter of fact, she has. And she said, well, I'm not surprised because it's a big one too. And she has an attachment on her shoulder. And I mean, again, I'm like, what? I had no idea that something like that could happen. And then the lady energetically did something with her hand, pulled it back, and then all of a sudden she and her friend are both stomping whatever it is that she'd pulled off of my daughter from that distance energetically into the ground. And she asked me, she said, ask your daughter how her shoulder feels. And I said, Brittany, how's your shoulder feeling? And she starts moving her shoulder, and all of a sudden she's doing this helicopter thing with her arm. And she said, it feels fine. I said, is your pain gone? And she acknowledged that it was gone. And and after that, she had no problem. There was no more complaints of pain or anything at all, but she had gotten an attachment in that haunted house by those things or wherever she had picked it up. Well, this happens a lot, though. There are a lot of people with pain pill addictions that would have never have had those addictions if they hadn't had an attachment that would create pain that they were seeking relief for.
That's true.
And a lot of these people, as the dark and the light, the darkness doesn't like the light because the light exposes what's in the darkness, and it's, they like to dub it out. The darkness likes to dub it out for people, and it can totally derail somebody's, in their direction or make their path harder of the goals that they want to accomplish if they inflict that. So, yeah, look at these people with somatic illnesses. They have somatic illnesses, and they claim that the people, they're very, very real to them, that they have pain and things like that, but that they're making it up. I don't know. I'd be looking at them in a little bit of a different way, because the pain is very real to them, even though there's not a physiological reason for it. Well, other than seeing, and I hope I'm answering this correctly, other than seeing like the backpacks or seeing that thing jumping from the ceiling, and I see things a lot. I go into homes, and I've had to clear homes of entities. People usually, when they call you first, the first thing they think it's a demon, and most of the time it's not. But I see the things a lot of times. So I don't know if that's what you are asking in that way. I see them. I see them when people are passing. I see their loved ones coming in. I've seen things that look like aliens, even on the other side, that have come in to gather people. I've seen aliens. Those sorts of things too. I just recently inherited a house. My sister passed away in June, and I go in. I'm aware that there's a male spirit and a female spirit in the house, but there's also something else. So I go in, ready to all bells and whistles to help the souls cross over and to get whatever is out of there so that the house can be either moved into or sold or rented to somebody. And the traditional things that I use, which everybody, if you're dealing with something of a darker level other than just spirits, ghosts, sage pisses them off. It doesn't clear them. It actually, if it's a demon, it tickles them. It makes them angrier. So you have to use something much stronger. And actually, I try to avoid doing demons because it's above my pay grade, and I really only do it for friends and close family if I have to. I hate doing that part. But poltergeists, things like that, poltergeists are different than demons. Anyway, I went in with all of what I knew to do. I went in literally with fire, because the fire component that I use sucks in the air, and if there are spirits in the room, they're given the option to leave. If they choose not to leave, they're sucked into the fire and stuck in the pan and something in the bottom of the pan. So I'm not going to tell what my components are. I'll tell you in private, but I don't want people doing this at home and then coming back and saying, "Oh, we heard this on Ryder's show, and our house burnt down," and then there's a big lawsuit.
Yeah.
Anyway, it didn't work, and I'm like, I'm not afraid of ghosts. I've seen demons. I've seen hell dogs. I've seen. I'm not afraid of them. It's kind of like I've become neutralized to them or something. But this particular thing, my half-sister who didn't see things was seeing in the house. My son was seeing it in my sister's house. I was seeing it. It would shift change. Sometimes it would show up as my father, but it didn't feel right. Sometimes it would show up as my sister, but it didn't feel right. And then I would find it shift changed into my father showing up in his ugly red and white paisley golf pants and his red shirt. And I remember thinking, Dad, oh, that's so ugly. We hated that when you were alive. Why would you be on the other side wearing something like that? And then I found a picture of him in that exact outfit upstairs in a room where there was this rock that was a piece of part of the problem. But I reached out to two of my friends that do remote viewing. And that one of them is Katie Turner, who is an excellent psychic. She's been on TV. She's my go-to person for many, many things. She's excellent. Turns out that I had an elemental in the house. I'd never dealt with anything like that before. I'm like, oh yeah, those people take care of elementals. That's not my thing. But it turned out that there was an elemental in the house that couldn't be removed by the traditional means normally, because the elemental was created when the earth was created and way before any kind of religion, for the lack of a better word, was even created. So blessings and prayers and sage and frankincense and myrrh and all of that, none of it worked. Basically, it's like, he's standing there. What have you got? It was this little tiny thing under 3 feet tall, literally looked like the bankers on Harry Potter. Because my son would
little
see
goblin guy.
Yes, and my son was standing there, and I see him. I don't say anything, and I'm standing in the hallway. My son's standing in the bedroom doorway of my sister's room, and there were 2 other bedrooms, and it comes from this 3rd bedroom. Turns out my sister brought a rock into the bedroom that belonged to the thing, and that's what he was coming for. And I remember seeing the rock. I almost threw it away. Thank God I didn't. It was an ugly rock, but he likes his rock. So he comes and he passes in front of me and goes to the bedroom, and my son's watching me. Says, "Did you just see Hogwarts go by?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I did." And then he comes back, passes my son, passes me, goes back to the bedroom. Then he comes out again. Only this time he's got balloons of all of these faces in a wreath that were souls that he had collected for his own entertainment and to draw energy from. My half-sister the night before had been sleeping in my sister's room. She said that something kept waking her up. And when she opened her eyes, she saw this wreath of faces all around her. Now, being empaths and spiritual, we see these things a lot. So most people would get up and run screaming out of the room after they wet themselves. But with us, it's kind of like, okay, you need to move along and just, go away. But unbeknownst to her, this little troll thing was standing next to the bed, holding them like balloons. They were his balloons. And so when he came back into the hallway the 3rd time to pass in front of me and then into my brother, those balloon faces in that wreath were there that my sister had described seeing the night before. So I wasn't able to use the traditional things to get it out, but he can shift change. He can shift change into an animal. He can literally a possum or cat or something else that he can do. And my son and I, it's more of a negotiation thing at the time. They hate people. And in order to keep him out of the house while I could get the things, my sister's belongings, out of the house, we've literally had to negotiate with baked goods and rum and tobacco and things like that and crystals to keep him out of the house. And we gave him back his rock. So and we gave him a shed space to stay in, literally. And I can't say the words that he uses, but his favorite, he loves to drop F-bombs. And and they're triple in a row. That's his favorite. F-bomb is his favorite term for me. And as my son and I were getting ready to leave, we made the announcement, we're going to be leaving tomorrow. You're not allowed in the house until we leave. And if you stay in your own area, we will give you something before we leave. And then there was a leak in the faucet. So we ended up having to stay an extra day. And of course, you could hear this thing when we came back into the house grumbling. He sounded kind of like the Tasmanian devil on Bugs Bunny with that grumbling. And then the F-bomb, F-bomb, F-bomb. So my son is loading the truck that evening because we were leaving then the next day. And all of a sudden I hear these F-bombs. And I'm running to the door because I'm thinking that my son has hurt himself in some way because he's loading some heavy things onto the truck. And I open the door and there he stands right at the door. And I said, "Are you all right?" And he said, "What?" And I said, "Why were you yelling obscenities outside the F-bombs?" He said, "That wasn't me." Now we're on a 2-acre lot out in the country. And it was like it was right outside that door. So we figured that it was the little troll in the backyard. So that next morning when we went to leave, my son had his car running. He had my truck, the truck that I was driving, running, and he was in the truck hooking up my charger from my phone. And I'm standing on the deck. And all of a sudden I hear F-bomb, F-bomb, F-bomb. And again, I'm thinking that it's my son. So I walk over, the door's open, and I said, "What's the matter?" And he said, "Nothing. I'm just hooking up your phone charger." And I said, "Why?" And before I could even get it out, we both hear F bomb, F bomb, F bomb. It was that little thing. And he's literally from the shed, from the backyard where the F bombs were being blurted out. He wanted to make sure that we knew that he was waiting for his treat before we left. I had a paranormal group at the house this past weekend with EVP readings and things like that, and they experienced him as well. So it's not just me. It was a whole team. They definitely got some EVP readings. We got some video of some things that they're going to be posting actually on Facebook coming soon. Not of him, but there were some spirits that were talking about him being in the shed. They identified that they had seen it's a Puckwedgie or Bogart, whatever it's called in that elemental realm. So not only do we have all of the spiritual stuff going on, we have some other things going on that influence people too. So it's like,
well, like Lynn said, I've seen several prisoners that had scratches across their back. It's like these 4 fingers just went right across their back. And had that happened in the prison, there would have been a fight. If somebody scratched somebody like that, but like Lynn was saying, there's no way anybody could do that. You can't get your hand around there to scratch the middle of your back like that. And he showed me that one morning. He said they attacked me last night. So they can do that. They can make people feel sick. They can make people feel paranoid. They can make people feel depressed. When I was working psych crisis in the emergency rooms, I could feel them. I couldn't see them. I couldn't hear them, but I could feel them. And it was like this icky electrical feeling. There's no other feeling in the planet like that. And, the patients couldn't lie to me. I'd ask them, are you hearing voices? And they'd say, oh, no, I'm not hearing voices. They wanted to get out of there. And I said, yes, you are. And this is how strong they are, and they'd say, well, how do you know that? Are you crazy too? Or I'd be like, no, but I can't see them. I can't hear them, but I can feel them. And I feel them coming off of you strong. Mm-hmm. So I could feel how angry they were at what I was telling these patients also. But like Lynn, I couldn't tell anybody that.
No. And the thing is too, is my son, when we spent the second night in that house, that haunted house, he woke up that morning with bite marks on his legs. And they were purple bite marks that looked like a dog bite. But I had a little schnauzer at the time, but the mouth was smaller than it would be on a dog, but too large to be like a rat. But you could literally count the teeth and the purple bruises that he had on his legs. And the night before, he took a bath and he put on I don't remember, it was Bob the Builder or whatever it was that he put on, the little shorts and the matching pajama shirt, and there was nothing on him. So he woke up that morning, whatever happened to him happened in that house during the night of whatever was in there that bit him. So they can leave claw marks, bruises, and bite marks. And the people that I had bought the house from, after I sold it, I tracked them down and mentioned to them, were you aware that the house was haunted? And I eventually spoke to the wife, and she was telling me too that her kids were showing up with mysterious dog bite marks and bruises that couldn't be explained, and that sort of thing in that house as well.
Lynn, so, yes, did you ever see these things on any other schizophrenics that you were working with on the psych ward there?
Not,
or is it just that one?
Just that one that day. I didn't really get to be close enough to any of them because like I said, I had been assigned a person, actually 2 different people that were suicidal, another one that was 2 of them that were addicts. And I never actually was assigned to the schizophrenic. So that's why I went around asking my other fellow students, does your person have schizophrenia? And they're like, yes. I just kept getting those with, like I said, with, they tried to commit suicide or whatever. Or
what did you see with those guys, the suicidal ones?
Their arc fields were distorted. They did have breaks in their window shield, so to speak, and but I didn't see any attachments on them per se. But that doesn't mean that they didn't have an influence in their house of some form that wasn't also telling them these things in their ear. I mean, they're always around. these spirits are always around everywhere, and you just have to either have a field that's large enough to push them away, or to be aware of your thoughts, that they're not your thoughts, that normally you wouldn't think of. Like you were talking about the guy needing to poop, that you would not, I mean, you would never think of something like that on your own. But they're always still trying to interject things to make you doubt yourself, or to see how far you will listen and go with that way. But yeah, I mean, people, they definitely have cracks in their windshields when they're suffering from that severe depression, that they would consider suicide or something, and it does leave them open to influence.
Okay, what you were saying is an important point. It's not just the schizophrenics who hear these things. We all hear them.
We do all the time.
They come into these things, inject thoughts into your mind that you think are you. Okay, but like I was talking to Ryder earlier, any negative thought about yourself or anybody else comes from the dark side.
That's true.
It's not your thought. Okay, the intention of that thought is not your intention. You would never do the kind of things that these things are telling you to do. Like, they might tell you to, hey, smack the guy in front of you, or do this, something you never would do on your own.
That's
and
true.
They're telling you just do that, or tell this guy off, or do something that would create turmoil.
Absolutely.
They don't want you to be peaceful. They don't want you to be loving. They're the opposite of that. And if you listen to them, you will become them.
And love actually is a repellent for them.
They hate it.
They hate it. They do. Absolutely, because they are not able to experience that emotion. And it is a repellent. And that's why I even tell people, if you're in a room and there's something creepy and you can't leave the room, start singing a joyous song, or just saying, I love you, I love you, I love you, out into the thing. I said, it will push them away. I mean, I've had, for instances, where I have seen entities that have come into the room that weren't so friendly during clearings, and I would say to them, I'd sit down and I'd say, come forth, I want to teach you a lesson on love. They'd look at each other and dart out of the room so fast, like there was a stench in the room. They don't like any kind of love or joy. They want to totally just keep people suffering.
Well, the voices want people to feel as paranoid as they possibly can. They will tell them any kind of lie to make them paranoid and miserable. Okay. And now the government does have that kind of technology. So the voices might tell them, yeah, the government is spying on you. See, it does exist. And try to convince them that it is the government spying on them, when it's, in fact, the voices are playing that. They can play any person. They can go into your mind, and they can pull up every rotten thing you've ever done and rub it in your face to create this negative emotional state that they need to feed off of. The worst I've seen was, at a funeral, say this one girl was badly abused by this uncle or somebody, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And at his funeral, she attended his funeral, and she's like, thank God he's dead. The voices returned and said, no, I'm not dead. You remember when we did this, or this happened to you, or whatever, and left her thinking that this guy was still plaguing her. Okay? So they will pull any kind of trick they can to make you feel paranoid, miserable, to drive you down to that negative emotional energy level that they can feed off of. They are parasites. They are feeding off of all of us, not just schizophrenics. That's
very true. Very true. And, also, as far as the electronic things, too, they can manipulate those.
Oh, yeah.
They can come through radios. People have heard them come through TVs, voices and things like that. So they can manipulate that as well. And that might be where the electronic thing is being said. I mean, back in the 1800s, you were either considered a witch if you had the ability to have empathic abilities, and you were hung. And then they had to slap the name of schizophrenia on there, which is kind of a broad term for, a couple of things. Mental illness, they kind of scoop them all under there, because as Jerry's explained, they really don't know what to do with it. There isn't anything other than a check sheet that they give people when they come in. Do you hear voices? Yes. Do you want to harm yourself? Yes or no? And you go down the check sheet, and then they put it through a machine, or they grade it themselves, and that's how they determine what you have. But it just, and even those questions aren't overly clear. You're like, well, maybe, on Monday, sometimes I feel like I'm depressed, but on Tuesday I'm fine. But they don't give you that gray area. So
See,
it's
there
either
is
yes
no
or no.
test.
Yeah, no.
There is no test. There is no uh, lab test. There is no EEG. There is no test for any mental illness. These
Nope.
were all made up by the psychiatric mafia and big pharma. They want to sell drugs, and they will come up with any concoction they can sell that people will buy. And none of these drugs cure any mental illness. All they do is tamp down symptoms. And the side effects are horrendous, especially with the antipsychotic drugs. Like we said, they shrink your brain with long-term use. They do physiological damage. Those side effects are toxic side effects from these poisonous drugs. They're the result of these poisonous drugs that they're feeding these guys, and they're feeding these things to children now. They got hundreds of thousands of children on these antipsychotic drugs, destroying their brains. These people have no conscience.
That's true. And with the adverse effects that they create, then there are additional medications need to be taken to correct those areas that are affected.
Yeah, like Cogentin. So they start experiencing these negative side effects of the drugs. So then they pile on another drug that masks the side effects of the first drug. So that the person is being destroyed, but they can't feel it.
Yeah.
Control.
Yep. They want to keep everybody in that herd mentality and keep everybody in check. They don't want you to question anything different.
They want you to be fear and turn to them. Like,
absolutely.
Oh yeah, you're afraid of this? Well, yeah, turn to us. We got drugs for that. We got this for that. So they create the problem and they also create the solution. And the mental health system on the planet has been taken over by big pharma and the psychiatric mafia. Nobody's getting better with this mental health system. It's a friggin' drug-fueled merry-go-round. Nobody's getting better. They're just being drugged.
From what I have seen with my own eyes, I've seen hundreds of people pass away, being in end-of-life care, being a nurse for over 30 years. Actually, I've been a nurse for 40 years. I turned 60 in May. So I have seen a lot of people pass away in 17 years in end-of-life care. And I've seen a beauty to death. If anybody can imagine that. There are certain things that happen. I've been able to see it from a nursing medical perspective. So I'm watching the body transition and go through the normal changes in breathing, changes in circulation and flow, while I'm also seeing the loved ones coming in as well. I have a couple of really, one thing that really brought it home for me is I had a patient that was blind. I think I mentioned this. Jerry's heard this story a couple of times. This lady was on my unit for about 2 weeks. I didn't know her that well. Her son and daughter come to the nurse's station. Mom's talking to people that are in the room that are not there. And of course, I know and seeing people coming to collect their loved ones over and over again. And so I told them, I said, I'll come down with you and check on your mama and see if there's anything that she needs to make her more comfortable. And I got down to the room, and of course, she's sitting at a slant and she's reaching up into the sky like she's being handed something very fragile, like a snowflake or something. And she's smiling. She's very happy with whatever it is she's doing. And I said to her, Edna, who's here? And she said, George. And her daughter turned as white as a sheet and had to sit down because she said, George is my father. My father's been dead for X amount of years. And then Edna speaks up and she says, and he's glad that you're taking good care of Pixie. Well, Pixie was Edna's poodle, and when George passed away, the poodle had to be taken over by the son, who because Edna couldn't care for the dog being blind. Now, Edna couldn't see shadows or anything; she could see nothing. So the son said to me, he said, "Well, do you think that my mom is hallucinating?" And I said, I can't just come out and say, "Oh no, I don't think she's hallucinating. I think your father's really here." To help her cross over. And so I said, I put it back to him and I said, well, do you think she's hallucinating? And he said, well, I don't know. And I said to him, well, I'm not trying to change your religious beliefs or whatever, you understand to be, is this process. I said, but do you mind if I ask your mom if I try something? And he said, no, go ahead. And I said, Edna, can I ask George a question? And she nodded her head, yes. And I said, what color is your son's shirt? And Edna said, yellow. Well, keep in mind that she's totally blind and she can't see anything. But as a person starts to transition into death, their filters efface, and their ability to hear the telepathy from the other side They can hear the communication as well as they can hear the communication of the embodied soul verbalizing on this side. So George told her what color shirt the son had on, and she relayed that. And the son immediately got it, and he said, "Hi, Dad." He realized that that was impossible. I've had so many, for instances, of people that are actively getting ready to pass, and sometimes they start seeing loved ones coming in even a year in advance. I've got a couple of things. I'll be happy to share them with you if you'd like.
Okay, and I was talking to Lynn just maybe a week or so after her sister died. I mean, she wasn't depressed. She wasn't the maid. She looked like she is just right now. I mean, there was no depression. There was, there's probably some sadness, but she came across like she is right now.
Well,
there wasn't any devastating.
Yeah, I'm actually very happy for her. I mean, where she's at, everybody wants to be. I mean, the feeling of the love and elation that comes through from the spirit realm while they're getting ready to help the person transition, there are no words to describe it, and there's no feeling that can touch it. It just is, and it's impossible to describe in our words. The feeling of the love and the warmth and the elation that comes from that other side that you get to partake in if you're open to it in the room. Jerry, which do you think would be better, telling the story about my mother passing and seeing her come out of her body, or the one about Abigail who had visitors prior to her death? Or I can tell both.
Well, certainly your mother.
Okay.
That impressed me because you were standing there watching this happen.
I was. My mother, the thing about people is a lot of times before they are getting ready to pass, a lot of them will know, and they'll start talking about it. They'll say, "Oh, Uncle Joe, would you please take care of my cat if something happens to me?" And everybody's like, "Oh, no, don't talk like that." And then the next day they cross over. My mother herself was going around the facility that she was in at the time, and she was telling people that she was going to go home tomorrow, that she was crossing over. As a matter of fact, she even told a lady whose dog had passed away just a couple of days before that she would keep an eye on her dog for her on the other side until the lady could pass over and get there. And sure enough, my mother passed away at around 1:30 the very next day. My mother was transferred to hospice. They called us, said that it was that she was starting to transition, and I went to the facility with my son and got there just pretty much in time. My mom was kind of in and out, and I stayed with her that evening. My brother was on his way trying to get there, and he wasn't able to make it in time. And then I had to leave to take my son home. But when I returned by myself. And as I'm sitting there, my mother was no longer able to open her eyes, and she wasn't able to verbalize anymore. She had lost her swallowing reflex and everything. That's usually one of the first things to go physically when this starts to happen. But she, and just to back up a little bit, sometimes people choose to leave early and they just leave the body there to finish, like my sister did in June. She left about 35 minutes before her body actually finished. My mother chose to stay until the last minute. She wanted to keep up with everything that was going on. And this was apparent because she would, when people would come in the room, she would move her eyebrows up and down and try to move her mouth to verbalize. And it was appropriate. People would come in and say, "Hi, Phyllis," and then she would stop. So as I'm sitting next to her, and I'm kind of speeding this up just a little bit, I'm sitting in a recliner next to her chair. Opposite of her bed, this ectoplasm or plasm started to form, kind of a misting in the room, and I could see movement on the other side. I could see a shoulder peek out or a pant leg peek out. And yes, people, they do show up in clothes. Nobody wants to see mom naked, meet you there at the pearly gates. I'm just saying pearly gates, but most would be like, mom, get some clothes on. It wouldn't be a joyous time to be greeted by your mother or father naked. So they do show up in clothes most of the time. I've only seen one naked ghost, and that's in another book that's just finishing editing as well. You will see them the way that you remember them last. However, the median age in heaven is around 30, 35. So that's when we're considered at our form when the body gets to its peak of an age, and physically at about 35, then it starts to decline age-wise. So we technically are in our 30s on the other side, but you will see them the way that you remember them last. As my mother was laying there, again, she was also at a slant. the end towards her bed started to efface, and I saw my mother's mother, my grandmother, step in, and she looked the exact same as I remembered seeing her. She had her tight little 1980s curly perm, and even presented in her glasses, and she had the leisure suit on that she had made for herself. And she walked into the room, and she went to my mother's bedside, and she started to stroke the inside of my mother's forearm, and she would lean forward to my mother and say something in my mother's ear, and my mother would respond with the eyebrows and the mouthing thing as my grandmother would stand back. And then my grandmother went forward again 2 other times in addition to this, 3 times total, and my mother was responding. And behind my grandmother, I could see this frantic wave, and my sister's perfume filled the room. My youngest sister was murdered by a jealous boyfriend when she was 20, and she was frantically waving. And like I said, her perfume, she had an unusual perfume that she wore back in the 80s called Latisse, and she presented into the room. And she actually came around the misting and embraced me. I could feel her hair falling over my face. I could smell her. I could feel her essence. And when she went to go back around, the whole wall had effaced. And there were hundreds of people in there. And there were also some beings there that looked like they were from somewhere else. And this is where I try to explain to people that are into the galactic thing versus the spiritual thing, that it's all connected. We've got to figure that we are made of energy. And if you want to go from a scientific place, energy can't be created or destroyed. And when we leave our bodies, we don't die. We just shed and go. But our energy has to go somewhere. And you've got to figure that with as many sunshines out there, there are stars out there, that there are suns for other solar systems, that it would be ignorant to think that we were the only ones. There are other life forms in other solar systems, maybe even people just like us. But when my mother passed away, I'm sitting there. I told her, I said, Mom, Graham and Robin are here. It's time for you to go. And she mouthed at me and moved her eyebrows up and down. I kissed her. I told her I would be okay, that I would see her, soon. And that's another thing too. If people could imagine death not as with the finality that they think of it as, but they will see their dog, they'll see their mother, they'll see the person again. This is not the last time that you're going to see them. They kind of look at it more like going on a long vacation versus a death, because you will see them again. And yes, pets do cross over as well. Well, I wasn't the one dying, and I was seeing it too. I'm not dead. I'm hopefully not anywhere close to being dead. I'm relating what I'm seeing. My mother wasn't telling me this. This is what I was seeing, and I've seen it again and again and again and again. It's just that with my mother, when she took her last breath about 10 minutes later, and I'm watching, and at the head of her bed, I see a group of spirits kind of huddling around like a football huddle and layered like a peony flower. And when they opened, my mother's spirit was standing in the center, kind of like they were trying to stabilize her spiritual feet. And my mother was beaming from ear to ear, and all of these people were coming to her, to greet her. I mean, there was this huge reception. It was a beautiful reception. And a lot of the people, not a lot, some of the people I recognized from this lifetime. My grandmother, uncles that had passed first, a cousin, some friends and things like that had crossed over. And some I did not, but my mother recognized them. So she knew who these people were in spirit form. I mean, and the thing is to see how elated she was, and to get to feel that reception and that warmth coming over. I mean, to me, in that moment, it was such a beautiful thing. I wanted to step and I said, hey, I want to come to the party too, Not that I wanted to die. I just wanted to step in for the day. And then I knew I had to go home as a single mom and take care of kids. But in that moment, you become so engrossed in it that you just, it's like food that is your favorite that you didn't know you were missing until you experienced it again, if that even makes sense. I don't know how to put it into human words, but I was even able to look into the other side. And I mean, there are colors there that we would need multiple color wheels. And it's not just that they're colors, they are living colors. When you connect with them, there's almost a pulsing energy about the colors and the flowers and the grass and, all of the things that they have there that I was able to look into and get to see with my mother. As my mother was greeted, the room kind of thinned out. At that time, too, I looked over and noticed that my mother had stopped breathing. And of course, when you're in that elation and you're sensitive and open to it, you can't help but smile. So I'm sitting there grinning from ear to ear. My mother has just stopped breathing, and I all of a sudden have that moment of sense, and I say, oh my God, I better call the nurse to come in and pronounce my mom dead, because if the nurse comes walking in and I'm sitting here smiling and my mother's just died, that's not a normal response. They might think that I did something to her. So I went ahead and I called the nurse, and the nurse came in and pronounced her dead, and she walked through all of the festivities that were going on. They didn't seem to be bothered by her. Everything continued on. And as the room thinned, there were 5 souls along with my mother and my sister that kind of lingered. 2 of them were angels. There were these other entities that were very, very tall. They didn't have wings, but they appeared to be the level of angels, but they also appeared to be from somewhere else. So that is why I say that there are beings from other places on the other side, because when they finish out their life cycles on whatever solar system that they're in or planet that they are on, they have to go someplace too. And they were part of the procession for my mother, assisting her to go out past me. And the thing was, is they passed me, each of them made contact with the top of my head, and it felt kind of tingly. So that was a very, very, I never grieved my mother's, my mother and I were very close, but I never grieved her leaving, because for one thing, I know where she is, and how could I deny, how could I want to hold her back from that? It just, life doesn't really begin until you die. So it just, it was a very, very beautiful thing. And as I had mentioned coming forward, just to say too, my mother is still in communication with me. I don't have control over it. She comes through when she wants to. She leaves beautiful she had long hair like mine, but it was opalescent white, and she leaves hairs. Even to this day, I've moved twice. I have a different car, and I am still, Thanksgiving last year, I found one of her hairs laying across one of the dining room seats. I find her hairs everywhere still, and she and I had an agreement before she passed away that she would leave me her hairs. And even on the day of her funeral, I went to draw a bath, and on the top of the bubbles, laying lengthwise, was one of her hairs. So they can do this. They can move things. They can leave things for you to let you know that they're still around. I had for instance, with my mother too, where I was in my psych class, but in the classroom part of it, and we had a very, very hard test that day. I had gone originally, before coming to the classroom, to the bookstore. I had to get a 3-ring binder and some loose leaf papers for the class to bring to class with me. So I went straight from the bookstore to the classroom, and I opened up that 3-ring binder to put the loose leaf papers in, and in the second ring, looped, was one of my mother's hairs in the teeth. Now, there's no way that they could have gotten there. And even if it was a fluke, it made me feel comforted. It was a day that I was taking a very hard test, and I didn't feel totally prepared for it, but it let me know that she was there supporting me. So with my sister, who recently passed in June, she was actually in the intensive care unit. So I didn't have the privacy that I had with my mother in hospice. There were all the beeping lights and the nurses coming in and out, but I could see the misting also when she left, and I knew that she left her body about 35 minutes before the body actually stopped. I've even seen spirits leave a day in advance, and sometimes the body just stays there to finish, and they're standing next to everybody else. That way, or I've seen them, transcend through. I've had patients that are close to their time seeing other people's spirits. I had a lady that had Alzheimer's that I had known her for 7 years. I'd been at the facility for 10 years. I had known her for 7 years. And I remember when she was up walking around talking to people, and she had declined so much with her Alzheimer's that she hadn't spoken one word in 3 years. And I see her tooling around the hallway in her wheelchair, scooting along, and she stops in front of the nurse's station. And just beyond her, continuing into the hallway, the first door on the right, there was a lady that was actively passing. And I had just come on shift. I'm going into the back to get my charts together to check the orders on things for people. And I overhear a lady yelling, "Take me home. Take me home. Please, please take me home." And I come out of the back and I'm looking in the hallway and there's nobody there, but Shirley's sitting there in her wheelchair. So I assumed that one of the CNAs or the other nurses had addressed the issue with whoever it was yelling, "Take me home," because it couldn't be Shirley, So I turn around to go back into the back area, and all of a sudden I hear again, "Take me home. Take me home. Please, please take me home." And I turn around and it's Shirley. Shirley's the one that's calling out. And I went over to her and I said, "Shirley," I said, who are you asking to take you home?" And she says, "Look at the angels. Aren't they beautiful?" And she pointed in the direction of the woman's room that was passing. And of course, I looked down the hallway, didn't see anything at first, but then I looked again and I could see the angels and the loved one of this woman bulging out of the wall into the hallway. And the woman passed away within about an hour, within a short time after that. But Shirley, who was 3 months from her own death, was sitting there and she could see the loved ones that had come in to collect this other lady and was yelling out to them to take her home.
People leaving their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
They astral travel in a lot of cases.
Interesting.
Like
Do you have any thoughts?
Well, like half in and half out. I mean, there have been some, for instances. I mean, I know that myself, I've had that happen where I was laying there and can only move my eyeballs. And a lot of times with that too, when you're coming back in, sometimes people will notice dark things that are around them, which become scary. So they affiliate it with a demon or something that's stopping them, which could be stopping them from re-entering their body completely at that point. But then they eventually get back in. But I agree with Jerry. I mean, there's really not a definite answer for that of what it is, because it is what he said, that they're kind of half in and half out and coming back in. Usually the paralysis happens when they're in that twilight sleep kind of waking up thing, and they can't, they're paralyzed. They had a lady that was on a show with Sylvia Brown that was talking about her sleep paralysis during a time that she was away. She had purchased a haunted house and she'd gone through all of this stuff, and she had a little boy, and she could hear him breathing weird, and she was kind of in that twilight sleep, and when she woke up she could only move her eyeballs, but she could literally feel an entity raping her. And it was distinct because when this happens, there are like eggplant purple bruises all down the insides of their legs, all over the pubic mound and the female parts when this happens, because they, as I said, they can leave bruises, they can leave nasty ones. And
sounds like an incubus or a succubus, right?
Yes, yes. And so, I mean, you could have something like that trolling you as well. I mean, you have stalkers in life, you've got stalkers in the spirit realm too. The thing is if they don't cross over, those sorts of things don't change. Something else I'd like to mention real quick before we close up. One thing that I did notice about my sister when she passed away is that we had her cremated. She wanted to have her ashes taken to the ocean. And so I was holding the box close to me wrapped in a towel. And I couldn't believe how, when you leave behind your body, how all of that negative stuff stays with the ashes and with the body. I mean, the depression, the anger, the jealousy, the fight you had with your mother. I mean, all of that is in those ashes that get left behind, and it has a negative energy about them that you can actually pick up on and feel. And granted, it feels familiar because that was also part of them while they were alive, as well as the good, which we all have our moments. So, but the thing was, it was so strong that I couldn't stand to continue to carry it with me. I went back and put her in a sand pail so that I could hold it away from my body and carry her into the ocean and submerge her into the ocean so it didn't blow anywhere. But the thing was with that experience and learning that, so many people want to carry a little bit of mom's ashes in a pendant, in a pendant that they wear around their neck. It's not about having it in your house, but they want to wear it close to their body. And granted, it does feel familiar, even though it's not necessarily the great part of mom. you want to kind of think about that before you do that, because it does have kind of a negative pull about it.
Yeah, and I can second that. With people who do leave their body, don't have any emotional anything. There's no emotions. They look down at their body laying in the bed, and it's like, oh, so what? There's no negative emotions. They don't carry that with them. There's no negative memories.
That's true.
That all, like Lynn said, they're all left behind. Mm-hmm. They don't go to the other side.
Yeah, the spirit, like Jerry was saying, the spirit goes to the other side, but all the gunk is left behind.
Right.
So yeah, they don't care. They're not, they don't have any of those negative emotions anymore. Any of the things that adversely affected them in this lifetime that helped them to create some of the situations that they got involved in that weren't exactly the best for them at that, during this lifetime.
There's a new psychotherapy called the MACE energy method that can absolutely cure most psychological problems. Okay. Lynn has experienced that. We work together with that. But find yourself a MACE practitioner. Mm-hmm. They will get rid of this stuff in maybe an hour, 2 hours, stuff that's been plaguing you your entire life. They don't want you to know that there's any other way to treat mental illness other than their drugs.
That's very true. Jerry actually did it on me, and I have to say, what a relief. He pulled stuff out of me from even childhood, some traumatic events from childhood. And the thing about it is you don't forget the incident, but you are not affected. But it's kind of like standing at the window looking in and saying, oh, wow, isn't that terrible that happened to those poor people? But it's not affecting you directly. You're not emotional about it. You're just, not like you were when you were actually in the situation and you were flight and fright and you were scared and you couldn't breathe because you were having so much anxiety. None of that is there anymore. You reflect on it and it doesn't have any effect on you anymore. So I can vouch that it really works.